Heyo everyone, I'm FreezeEngine and today I'd like to talk to you about how to approach a boss lair / boss banish in Hunt Showdown. I've had some questions regarding this come up every now and then during my Hunt Showdown streams, and I thought I'd go a bit more in depth and make a full-blown video about it. Successfully pushing a boss banish is dependent on a few factors that really work with each other. We're gonna take a look at each of these factors and I'll try to give you some tips and tricks for each scenario. Before we get into it though, just a small disclaimer. This is no guide that will give you a 100% success rate in pushing a boss banish / lair. This is a video where I try to give you some insights into the process and try to give you tips based on my experiences. With that out of the way, let's talk about the first factor. The first and probably most important thing to factor in is which constellation you're playing in. Are you going in as a solo? Maybe as a duo? Trios even? Each team size has their own advantages and disadvantages, as well as slightly different approach possibilities. Let's talk about solos first. As a solo, you always have the element of surprise on your side, since people usually count on 2 or even 3 people showing up. This can give you great opportunities, however, you still have to decide how you want to approach the situation. As a solo, you have to do all the work by yourself. That means you can only go with one option / approach. That basically means you either push, silently creeping into the compound, going in for a rush to surprise them, or keep your distance and wait out the situation by holding an angle or follow / hunt the bounty carriers once they leave. Keep in mind that as a solo, once you pick up that bounty, you are a walking target. This is why it is important to know what you actually want. Do you want to extract a bounty? Do you want to get lots of kills? Meme on some people? Always know what you want to go for. Here are the pros and cons of the solo approach summarized for you. Now as a duo, the odds are no longer against you, and you have a teammate that can help you achieve your goal by working with you. Be aware though that this can increase the chance of getting spotted, no matter the approach. The beauty of duos, and frankly trios as well however, is that you no longer are limited to one option for approach. You can split up your tactics and cover 2 approaches. It is important to have determined your favorite playstyle / the playstyle you're most comfortable with. More on that later though. If everyone has their specialty, like sneaking in, sniping from afar, or distracting enemies, you can use these tactics to destroy the enemy teams. You might have a friend that really likes pushing with a shotgun, and you might enjoy keeping your distance, so he pushes in and you try to give him cover fire and monitor the compound. If you're both sneaky hunters, you might want to sneak in from 2 different angles and catch the enemy team in a silent death grip. This principle is the same for trios as I've said, with the added factor that you can either approach with 3 playstyles or have 2 people playing the same style, strengthening it in the process. So instead of 1 hunter pushing and 1 covering his back, you can have 2 people pushing and 1 sniping from the distance. I implore every solo and duo / trio to actually try out different approaches and test which one works best and which one is the most fun. Don't get stuck on a single approach option, try to be variable. Here you can see the summarized pros and cons for the duo approach. Approaching as a trio. We've touched on the topic of the 3 simultaneous approaches, but as a trio, you generally have more firepower and the option to run a lot of different playstyles in a single match. You can combine sneaky and silent loadouts with long range or loud and proud loadouts to basically be ready for everything. Well, almost. Be aware though that successfully playing / approaching as a trio requires good communication, and the positive aspects of more firepower and more weapon variants is also true for the enemy teams. Another thing to keep in mind during trios is that you should watch out for the enemy team being quite spread out in the boss compound. They probably won't all be sitting inside one building, so keep your attention on your surroundings as well. And here are the pros and cons for the trio approach. Find out what you're best at. By this, I specifically mean what and where you are best during a firefight. Do you feel more comfortable in close quarters, rushing people from around corners, or do you like the more open areas that enable you to snipe your enemy? Find out where you feel best and where you are at your deadliest. Once you've found that, try to direct fights to this specific area. Lure a bounty team outside, push / rush them while they're still hiding inside the building. Take the upper hand on the battlefield whenever you can. Playstyles. As I've mentioned before, it is very important to know what you're best at. And once you do, it is good to know what kind of playstyle you are most interested in. Are you more of a stealthy guy? Are you good at rotating and holding angles? Or do you like going in guns blazing? Determine which playstyle you prefer, and if you're playing in a team, let your team know what playstyle you specialize in. It can help build tactics and make sure everyone utilizes their strengths in the game. The approaches. Now that we've got the basics out of the way, let's actually talk about 3 approaches that I usually do. Note that those aren't the only approaches that you can pick, but those are just my favorite and the most common ones I use. The first one is sneaking in. Sneaking in refers to the approach where you actually try to get into the boss lair without the enemy team knowing. It is a very slow approach that has the risk of getting killed by a third team closing in on the boss lair, since you are sneaking/crouching for most of the approach. It leaves you as an easy target for people who have a clear visual to you. This can also be the enemy team hiding in the boss lair, looking out of a window or a crack. This is why it can be very beneficial to use corridors, walls, or other forms of cover to conceal yourself as much as possible to minimize the chance of the bounty or third team spotting you. Even if they notice the aggressive whisper in Darkside, if you're silent enough, they just know that someone is there, not where he or she is though. This approach really shines once you're actually inside the lair with the enemy. Depending on the status of the boss, you can now either catch them by surprise while they're distracted by the boss, or you can pick them off once they're defending the premise from outside attacks, killing them from the inside essentially. Beneficial loadouts for this approach are silenced and close ranged weapons like the Vetterli Silencer, Nagant Silencer, especially with fanning, the crossbow/hunting bow, shotguns, and of course melee weapons like the saber or the combat axe. Pair these with flash bombs to blind your unknowing enemy, hive bombs plus antidote shots to further distract and damage the enemy, and decoys to divert their attention away from you. The standoff. One of the most common approaches, the standoff basically means you are advancing into the compound, trying to avoid the sound traps, but making no real secret out of your presence. You try to figure out where the enemy is and start your attack as soon as you have the opportunity for it. Other than with the sneak approach, the enemy team can often spot you fairly quickly once they check the whisper mechanic, so be aware that you can be spotted first, especially if there are many buildings around where people could be hiding in. When the fight starts, it is an on-off battle between the enemy in the lair and you/your team on the outside. Shots are being exchanged and grenades are being thrown. Both teams are occupied with each other, and this can leave your team vulnerable for a third team attacking the same compound. Rotation and finding angles are key for this approach, since staying/peeking the same angle too often will most often result in death. In duos or trios, the standoff is a good base for starting side approaches. That means while you're occupying the enemy team, your teammates can start a sneak in or rush approach, creating a double jeopardy for the defending team. Note that a sneaking in approach can also quickly turn into a standoff if the bounty team spots you trying to sneak in. Good loadouts for this general approach are medium to long range rifles, revolvers, explosive bombs and AoE bombs, so concertina or poison bombs, for restricting movement inside the boss lair, and regeneration shots that heal you during rotation, etc. The rush. This one is a very high risk, high reward approach. You start out getting close to the compound while watching sound traps and zombies, and once you're close to an entrance to the boss lair, you're ready to go. Note that this approach works best when the enemy team is still fighting the boss and they don't know about your presence. You can now choose to either rush in with a melee weapon like a knife, saber or axe, or with a close range/one-shot weapon like a crossbow, hunting bow or a shotgun of your choice. The rest is pretty self-explanatory. Run inside and try to kill them up close and personal. Trying to get them while they're engaged in combat with the boss can be very beneficial because they could potentially be hurt, bleeding, or even poisoned, which could prevent them from healing. Disadvantages for this approach are that the enemy team can have shotguns, crossbows, or melee weapons as well, and kill you if they spot you first. Similar to the sneak in, this approach can really benefit from flash and hive bombs, especially if it is a lair with multiple floors. As I've touched on before, beneficial loadouts for this approach are melee weapons like the knife, combat axe or saber, crossbows or hunting bows, shotguns, and rifles with a bayonet attachment. In the end, it is important to go into a bounty push/approach with a plan. Be sure about what you want and how to get it. When playing with friends, communication and getting to know each other's playstyles and strengths is key. Build on top of that and never forget to have fun. Squeeze in a meme round every now and then to keep things fresh. If you have anything more to add to these approaches or want to express some criticism, leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. I'm Freeze Engine and I hope to see you next stream. Bye bye!
Xardas. Für Xardas. Macht bedeutet alles. Du hast dich entschieden. Für Xardas. Xardas. Für Xardas.